I want to bring into the conversation now Mametlwe Sebei, who's with the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign. I want to take, as the start of the conversation, your reaction to some of those interventions announced by the MMC there.
Well, I think we should all be scandalized by the fact that a year after Marshalltown, we have another tragedy. And this tragedy is not just confined to Jeppestown. We're talking about Jeppestown, and I think the loss of 4 lives is tragic. Is sad, we're shocked, we're outraged, and I think we shouldn't normalize these needless losses of poor black working class lives. But just before today, yesterday, as we were having a meeting of the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign, there was an outbreak of another fire outside of town. That is in Mametlwe, in Rivoli, just south of Johannesburg, where 1 person has died. I think others are saying 2, 3, and 34 shacks were gathered by fire. Many people were injured. Over 100 people are without homes as we are speaking at the moment. And the reality is, there is a permanent state of disaster insofar as a housing crisis in the city of Johannesburg, but that is true of all the major urban centers in the country, both in the inner cities, which is testified by the fact that there is over 224 of these buildings that are said to be abandoned, dilapidated, hijacked, whatsoever, right? The city has been aware about them, not since last year, but for years now. Nothing has been done about them, but also the state of a permanent disasters in, of course, informal settlements at the outskirts of the city of Johannesburg, in Rivoli, in Soweto, and Alexander, and all these places and so on, where people are losing life, to fires, to floods, to violence, and it's just a complete disaster from the point of view of the working class people whose lives have been devastated by these disasters.
Yeah, the amount of, let's circle in on those 224 buildings. Like, some of them belong to people we don't know, we can't identify. They're abandoned. These people left the country, and the city has now has to take on the task of being able to identify some of the owners of these buildings. But more importantly, in dealing with the groups of people that have occupied these buildings and have made these buildings their homes. For instance, some of these people have been struggling to pay over rates and taxes to the city of Johannesburg, because the city at some point said, we only deal with the owner of the building. The people in the building say, we don't know who the owner is. From a relocation standpoint and from a rehabilitation standpoint, what has the city done in the last year since the Marshalltown fire that you are aware of?
Nothing. In actual fact, you just have to look even in terms of how are they managing the tragedy of Usindiswa itself. We had a meeting yesterday. There are people who have not buried their loved ones as we are talking, right? There are comrades in that campaign who are saying to me, my child, we identified him, her in the first days of the tragedy. The city misplaced her body, and to this very day, they've not buried. And that story of Comrade Mike, because we are advocating around it and so on, I can name him, right, is not unfortunately alone. It's a story of many of those victims. So if they have not finalized burials a year later, the idea that they've addressed any of this crisis will be delusional. In fact, one of the reports that shocked me was the survivors telling me that Usindiswa, as we are talking at the moment, is being reoccupied by people who are desperate for accommodation. So we can talk about buildings being hijacked by criminal syndicates, and there is a problem. These are syndicates that extort money out of disparate and poor people that are seeking, accommodation in the inner city of Johannesburg. The real crisis here is that we have a waiting list of 500,000 people looking for houses in the city of Johannesburg. The city is building houses at the rate of 2,500. Now, your basic mathematics will tell you the rate at which we're building houses, it means it will take us 200 years just to be able to clear the current housing backlog. And that does not even account for the fact that the population of the city increased by somewhere between 120 to 150,000. Overall, it means 1.5 million people over a period of 10 years.
Yeah.
When you take account of that, the plans of the city, what is actually being done in terms of public housing is never going to address this crisis. And I think for me, that is telling about the elite and the bankruptcy of their neoliberal policies that have landed us in this crisis, where we have a massive housing backlog that is not being
The city says
resolved.
that they don't have the money, one, and two, they said they try to invite the private sector to come and assist them in creating low-cost social housing, yet it's been nearly impossible getting that off the ground. What's your reflection on that?
I mean, the privatization of housing is part of the problem and the reason that we are here. Just since this democracy, from 1994, the housing property has risen in terms of cost by 833%, right? What does that mean? For 11.4 million people that are unemployed in this country, many of whom have no income, half of the workers that are at workplaces earning, and their wages are at minimum wage of 4,600, and of course, 75% of the overall labor force, whose wages are seen somewhere below 6,500, if we take account of the fact that the last report in 2022 was showing that 75% of the workers were earning only 5,800 a wage a month. Now, that the value of property is where it is at. It explains the country and the city built on inequalities. And that is a problem because the housing market has outpriced majority of the working class and poor people. And it's that level of desperation that we must address, because those are the people that are forced to enter these buildings that are said to be abandoned, that are said to be hijacked.
And it's a runaway problem that the city will have to get involved.
They've been taken advantage of by the criminal sentences that are extorting them to pay rentals over property that they don't own, to make them pay for services that they illegally connect. And the end result are some of the tragedies.
Mametlwe, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and bringing some of these issues to the fore for us. Really do appreciate it. That is Mametlwe Sebei, who's with the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign.